For many, this is the best Marvel film, but the story of a group trying to save the galaxy is only the surface. Beneath all the action in this first installment lies a true portrait of loss and the struggle to open oneself again to love, friendship, and life. After watching this video, you will never see this film the same way again. In 1988, a boy named Peter Quill listened to music on his old Walkman while waiting in a hospital. His grandfather calls him in to say goodbye to his mother, Meredith, who lies on her deathbed. Meredith asks him why he got into another fight, and Peter explains that he couldn't stand to see a frog being killed for no reason. She tells him he's like his father, an angel made of light, and gives him a gift to open once she's gone. She reaches out her hand, but Peter cannot bring himself to take it. In that moment, Meredith dies. He screams and sobs uncontrollably. His grandfather pulls him from the room, and Peter, devastated, runs into the field, falls to his knees, and the sky opens. An alien spaceship appears and abducts him. 26 years later, Peter is a scavenger traveling across uninhabited planets with his music as his sole companion. On Morag, he finds a mysterious hidden orb, but Korath and his men intercept him. Peter manages to escape and flees in his ship, the Milano, where he finds a woman whose name he doesn't even remember and whom he had forgotten was still aboard. He then receives a call from Yondu, the leader of the Ravagers, who raised him. Yondu is furious because Peter took the orb on his own and places a bounty on his head, but Peter brushes it off. In another corner of the galaxy, Ronan the Accuser, a fanatic of the Kree Empire who rejects the peace treaty with Xandar, brutally murders a prisoner. He seeks revenge against the people of Xandar for the death of his father and ancestors. When Korath informs him that Peter Quill stole the orb, Gamora, adopted daughter of Thanos, volunteers to retrieve it. Ronan had promised to deliver the orb to Thanos in exchange for the destruction of Xandar. On Xandar, Peter tries to sell the orb to a merchant, but the deal falls through at the mention of Ronan out of fear. Gamora intercepts him, attacks him, and seizes the orb. However, before she can escape, Rocket, a genetically modified raccoon, and Groot, a giant tree-like being, arrive, seeking to capture Peter for the bounty. A fight breaks out among the four, ending with the intervention of the Nova Corps, Xandar's peacekeeping force, who arrest them and send them to the Kylan prison. In prison, the four do not go unnoticed. Rocket and Groot are already known for their criminal record. Gamora sparks immediate hatred due to her connection with Thanos and Ronan. Peter insists on being called Star-Lord, though no one takes him seriously. There, they meet Drax the Destroyer, a warrior seeking vengeance against Ronan for the murder of his wife and daughter, and who wishes to kill Gamora for being his ally. But Gamora reveals that she planned to betray Ronan and sell the orb to escape both him and Thanos. Peter convinces Drax to let her live, assuring him that Ronan will come for her, and that way, he'll be able to take his revenge directly. Drax agrees. If we read between the lines, we can see that this first Guardians of the Galaxy film is a powerful metaphor for loss. It speaks to how difficult it is to confront pain when we lose someone we love, and also to how courageous it is to open yourself again to life, to new possibilities and new connections, when the easiest path would be to shut your heart forever. All the future Guardians share the pain of loss, and at the start of the film, none of them have been able to deal with that pain constructively. I'll explore how each one has isolated themselves in their own way. Let's begin with Peter Quill. The first thing we saw in the movie was the death of his mother. It was a key scene because it laid the emotional foundation for the entire story and for Peter's character arc. From that moment on, he developed a deep fear of intimacy, because when you form a bond, you risk losing it, and losing someone hurts. The scene portrayed this perfectly. His mother, in her final moments, reached out her hand, and Peter couldn't take it. He didn't dare, because to take her hand was to accept that he was going to lose her. And ever since then, Peter has been emotionally shut down. He hasn't taken anyone's hand or formed any intimate, genuine connection. When we meet him as an adult, the first thing we notice is that he's completely alone, with no real emotional ties to anyone. Even with the Ravagers, who technically raised him, there doesn't seem to be a deep emotional bond. In fact, his relationship with Yondu seems filled with resentment and hostility. Then there was one detail that, for me, was not minor. When Peter returned to his ship, he found a woman still on board, and he didn't even remember she was there. That's another sign of his emotional detachment. This is how Peter has related to women all this time. The pain of his mother's death remains unresolved, and that's why Peter avoids getting involved. His way of protecting himself is by not getting too close to anyone, because that way, he won't suffer another loss. That defense also leaves him very alone. That is the central conflict Peter will face in this first film. Can he allow himself to connect, even knowing there's a chance of losing again? Just a quick pause to say that if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot and really helps me keep making more videos and content like this. Alright, let's get back to the story. Peter explains to Gamora that he saved her because he knows where to sell the orb. She proposes joining forces with Rocket, Groot, and him to escape. Meanwhile, Ronan is summoned by Thanos after learning of Gamora's betrayal. Ronan kills one of Thanos' emissaries. Thanos scolds him for his childish behavior and reminds him that Gamora was his favorite daughter. Even so, he keeps his word. He will destroy Xandar if Ronan delivers the orb. Back in the prison, Peter, Rocket, Groot, and Gamora plan their escape while eating. Rocket, an expert in breakouts, explains what they'll need: a security bracelet, a prosthetic leg, and a battery located at the top of the watchtower. While Rocket explains that the battery must be removed last to avoid triggering the alarms, Groot, misunderstanding the plan, immediately pulls it out, and the prison enters emergency mode. Everything descends into chaos. Guards surround Groot, who withstands their gunfire while Rocket climbs onto his back. Gamora fights hand-to-hand to obtain the bracelet, and Peter manages to acquire the prosthetic leg in exchange for a hefty sum. Drax, seeing what they're doing, decides to join in and helps hold off the guards, even throwing one into the air and handing Rocket a weapon. Once regrouped, they ascend the watchtower thanks to Groot, who stretches upward like a ladder. Rocket, laughing, admits he didn't actually need the leg. He just wanted to see if Peter could get it. He then modifies the battery and the bracelet to create a device that shuts off gravity throughout the prison, except for the tower. The prisoners float while the group escapes. Outside, they move to recover their belongings. Peter finds the Milano, and while the others retrieve their gear, he searches for something more important than the orb: his Walkman. Once he recovers it, he returns to the group. Aboard the ship, tensions begin to surface. They argue over what to do with the orb. Peter suspects it might be a weapon, and Drax suggests they should use it against Ronan. Gamora stops him, warning that the orb could kill them all. The argument intensifies until Peter cuts in, reminding them that they're only together until they get paid. Gamora tells him they have a deal, but that she would never be his partner. She then says she will notify the buyer that they're on their way. Meanwhile, Ronan is torturing prison guards in search of clues about the orb, and Yondu is following Peter's trail, pressuring the merchant for information about who wants to purchase it. In Nowhere, a lawless place inside the skull of an ancient celestial being, the Guardians go to meet the orb's buyer, the Collector. Centuries ago, the Tivan group sent workers to extract organic material from the skull, valuable but dangerous resources, accessible only to outlaws. While they wait, Drax, Rocket, and Groot get drunk and gamble. Peter and Gamora, on the other hand, talk. She tells them that Thanos is not her father. They murdered her parents in front of her, tortured her, and turned her into a weapon. She decided to betray him when she learned that he planned to destroy an entire planet for Ronan. Peter confesses to her that he risked his life for his Walkman because it was the last thing he had left from his mother. She loved sharing her favorite songs with him. He plays her a song and tries to teach her how to dance. They are about to kiss, but she stops him with a dagger and warns him that she's not a naive little fool who will fall for his charms. Now let's turn to Gamora. She too has been shaped by loss. We now know that Thanos wiped out half her race, including her parents, right in front of her eyes. And after that, he adopted her, trained her to serve him, and forced her to suppress any emotions that might distract her from her objectives. He also physically modified her to turn her into a weapon. How does a child survive something like that? By shutting down emotionally. By becoming cold and distrustful. Gamora knows virtually nothing of love, nor what emotional intimacy entails. Her entire life has revolved around obedience, combat, and survival. That's why, even though the chemistry with Peter is obvious, she doesn't know what to do with it. She doesn't have the emotional tools to handle what she's feeling. This affection that begins to emerge confuses and unsettles her. And as she's always done, she protects herself by raising her emotional armor. The moment is broken when Drax, drunk, starts a fight with Groot and calls Rocket a vermin. Rocket points his weapon and explodes with rage. He never asked to be created, nor to be torn apart and rebuilt until he became a little monster. Peter intervenes to calm him down and reminds him that they're about to get rich, that he just needs to hold on one more night. Peter then points out that this is why none of them have friends, because no one can speak to them without fear of being shot full of holes. Now we can talk about Drax and Rocket. Drax has also experienced loss. He lost his wife and daughter and hasn't known how to cope with that pain. He has buried all that suffering under hatred and an obsessive desire for vengeance that dominates him and blinds him to everything else. It makes him reckless. He only wants to destroy Ronan, no matter who he takes down with him in the process. And Rocket lost his former life as a raccoon. He was manipulated, modified against his will, and ridiculed for what he is. That has scarred him so deeply that he lives constantly on the defensive. Every time someone calls him a rodent, vermin, or monster, he explodes. Rocket doesn't form bonds because he believes no one will accept him. His only real connection is with Groot. And it makes sense. Groot is noble and simple. He only says, "I am Groot," so he doesn't judge and doesn't hurt. Rocket can project onto him what he needs without having to confront the emotional complexity that comes with bonding with someone else. So of course, when all these characters first came together, the natural reaction was hostility. each with open wounds and walls raised. Peter said it clearly just a moment ago. That's why you don't have friends, because no one can talk to you without fear of being filled with bullets. And that sentence sums up quite well how they protect themselves, by pushing others away before they can get too close. At that moment, Karina, assistant to Tivan the Collector, arrives and takes them to his museum, filled with creatures, relics, and oddities. There, they meet Tivan, who explains that inside the orb is one of the 6 Infinity Stones, remnants of singularities that predate the universe. Only beings of immense power can wield it. And with it, they could destroy entire civilizations. Only one group managed to share its power for a brief moment before perishing. When Rocket demands payment, Tivan prepares to deliver it, but Karina, fed up with her enslavement, touches the stone, and she triggers a massive explosion that destroys the museum. The group survives, but they now understand that the orb is a weapon capable of planetary destruction. Gamora proposes taking the orb to the Nova Corps, hoping they might be able to contain it. Rocket mocks her. The Nova Corps is already hunting them. He suggests giving it to Ronan to save themselves. Peter refuses. Handing over the orb would doom the galaxy. Rocket asks why he would want to save it, and Peter, for the first time, acknowledges that he is someone who lives in it. But there's no time to argue further. Ronan and Nebula arrive. Drax, blinded by vengeance, had sent a message challenging Ronan. At the same time, Yondu and the Ravager show up to capture Peter. Peter, Gamora, and Rocket escape in mining pods. Nebula goes after them. Drax stays behind to face Ronan, but he is quickly defeated and thrown into a pool. Meanwhile, Nebula catches up to Gamora and tells her that, of all their siblings, she was the one she hated the least. Gamora begs her to listen to reason, but Nebula destroys her ship, leaving her drifting helplessly in space, and takes the orb. Seeing her slowly dying, Peter makes a desperate decision. He calls Yondu, gives him his location, and hurls himself into the void to save her. He places his oxygen mask on her, willing to sacrifice himself. Yondu arrives and rescues them. Gamora wakes in Peter's arms. He admits he couldn't let her die. Something inside him awakened. Something heroic. She asks about the orb. Peter confesses they've lost it. Meanwhile, Groot rescues Drax from the pool. Rocket lands, furious that Drax endangered them all. Drax admits his mistake and confesses that his rage was a way to hide his pain. Rocket, still upset, tells him that everyone loses those they love, but that doesn't give him the right to destroy everything around him. Rocket tells Groot they should flee, now that Ronan has the stone, but Groot wants to save the only friends they've ever had, and so does Drax. Rocket yells in frustration. Meanwhile, aboard his ship, Ronan speaks with Thanos. Now that he knows the orb contains an Infinity Stone, he no longer needs him, and as the power surges through him, he vows to destroy Xandar, and then Thanos himself. Nebula, resentful of Thanos for what he did to her, tells Ronan that if he keeps his word, she will help him destroy worlds. Aboard Yondu's ship, Peter is being beaten as Yondu accuses him of betrayal, reminding him that he saved him from being eaten by his men when he was a child. Peter, tired of hearing that story, tells him that in reality, he captured him and stole his home. Gamora interrupts, warning about the power of the Infinity Stone and urging them to recover it. But Yondu doesn't listen, until Peter promises him the greatest loot he's ever seen if he lets him live. He proposes teaming up to face Ronan, like in the old days. Yondu, intrigued, agrees. Rocket appears with the Milano and threatens to blow up the ship if they don't release his friends, but Peter manages to calm him down. At first, the group had come together only out of convenience. Gamora wanted the orb to betray Thanos and gain her freedom, but she needed to escape prison. Rocket and Groot knew how to escape, but what they cared about was the bounty. Peter was also interested in the loot, and Drax joined only because he saw an opportunity to get closer to Ronan. No one was there out of affection or loyalty. It was an alliance forged by circumstance, each with their own agenda and their own pain to bear. But the beautiful thing is that this began to change. Even though none of them wanted to be there at first, and each had their own reasons to remain emotionally guarded, simply spending time together and facing danger side by side began to open cracks in the walls each had built around themselves. They were forced to coexist, and in doing so, they were forced to see one another. And in seeing one another, they began to notice the loss in the other, something familiar to them. And when you recognize your own pain in someone else, that's when connection can begin. And so, without meaning to, bonds began to form. And a moment came when each of them reached an emotional turning point, the point at which their wounds began to heal, or at the very least, where they dared to open the door to something new. For Peter, that moment came when he chose to save Gamora. The relationship between them was key to both of them beginning to unlock emotionally. At first, Peter tried to seduce her, seeking a physical connection, the only way he knew how to relate to women. But Gamora, unlike many others, set a clear boundary. We saw how she stopped him, and that probably threw him off and intrigued him. It also forced him to see her differently. Little by little, he began to realize that what he felt for her went far beyond the physical. That realization became impossible to ignore when he saw her floating in space, slowly dying. That scene was incredibly powerful. In that moment, Peter was emotionally transported back to the hospital where he watched his mother die. The two scenes mirror each other. 2 women he feels deeply for, dying in front of him. 2 outstretched hands. 2 opportunities to decide whether to remain paralyzed by fear or to act. As a child, he couldn't take his mother's hand. But now, with Gamora, life gave him another chance. And this time he did. He took her hand, knowing he might die. And with that act, he symbolically closed the emotional loop that had remained open since his childhood. He reconciled with the boy who couldn't save his mother, and he began to lose the fear of truly connecting. For Gamora, that moment was also decisive. It was likely the first time in a very long time that someone had done something so genuine for her. Let's remember, she was a child raised by a genocidal tyrant, turned into a weapon, physically modified, used as a tool, and emotionally isolated from a very young age. She doesn't know what love is, and when Peter risked his life for her, expecting nothing in return, even willing to die for her, her emotional walls began to crumble, if only a little. Perhaps, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that not everything in life has to be painful, and that maybe it's possible to let someone in. Drax's turning point came when Groot rescued him after he was defeated by Ronan. At that moment, Drax realized that his unprocessed pain had turned into rage, and that rage clouded his judgment, made him reckless, and led him to endanger people for whom, though he hadn't said it, he was already starting to care. And Groot's rescue was crucial, because Drax realized that the affection was mutual. Groot didn't have to save him, but he did. From that point on, Drax began to act less for himself and more for others. He was no longer just seeking revenge. He was starting to want to protect his new friends. And Rocket, well, he also had his key moment. Though true to his nature, he didn't admit it openly, but it had already become clear that he had developed genuine affection for the group. As I mentioned, Rocket had built his entire identity around rejection. He's felt like an aberration and lived a life marked by contempt. To survive, he constructed a shell of sarcasm, irony, and cynicism. But then, he saw Peter risk his life for Gamora, and Groot save Drax. Rocket began to realize how, little by little, everyone had stopped acting out of self-interest and started acting out of care. He was finally able to lower his guard, let go of that deep fear of rejection, and make the decision to be part of something. For the first time in his life, he felt accepted and cared for by others. And that collective transformation I've just described is crystallized in the following speech from Peter. The group gathers, though not without disagreements. Then Peter speaks from the heart. He says they're all losers because they've lost something: homes, families, normal lives. But today, life has given them the chance to do something truly meaningful. And that's why he won't stand by while Ronan destroys millions of lives. One by one, the others agree to join the cause, knowing they might die. Gamora, Drax, Groot, and finally, Rocket. The group is no longer driven by self-interest. In the beginning, they each had their own goal: freedom, money, or revenge. But now, they care about each other. They've learned to trust, to care, even at the risk of loss. And only when they were able to truly care about others were they ready to care about the entire universe. They devise a plan: stop Ronan from reaching the surface of Xandar. Peter contacts the Nova Corps to request their help, and though hesitant, they decide to trust him. With the plan in motion, and just 15 minutes from the Dark Aster, Yondu warns Peter that he expects the stone after the battle, or he'll destroy him. The Ravengers and Nova Corps attack the Dark Aster. Nova forms a net to prevent the ship from landing, while Rocket and Yondu try to breach the hull so the team can infiltrate. Yondu falls in battle and is forced to make an emergency landing. Peter, Gamora, Groot, and Drax manage to enter. In the darkness, Groot lights the way. Drax, for the first time, thanks them for accepting him despite his mistakes. He says it feels good to have friends again, but the calm doesn't last. Nebula appears, and Gamora stays behind to face her while the others move forward. Ronan orders a massive strike on Xandar. Ships fall like raining fire upon the city. The Nova Corps holds its ground, but the losses are enormous. Rocket coordinates with Saul to protect the city, but their forces are insufficient. Meanwhile, Quill, Drax, and Groot confront Korath and his men. Drax defeats him, and as more enemies close in, Groot unleashes a devastating root attack to stop them. Ronan, determined to destroy Xandar, activates the Infinity Stone in his hammer and obliterates the Nova Corps' fleet, including Saul's ship. Rocket watches helplessly. Meanwhile, Gamora defeats Nebula, who ends up hanging from the edge of the ship. Gamora begs her to join them to stop Ronan, but Nebula, stubborn as ever, cuts off her own hand and escapes. Gamora opens access to the command room, and the group confronts Ronan. Peter shoots him with a cannon created by Rocket, but it's not enough. Ronan survives, throws them through the air, and grabs Drax by the neck. At that moment, Rocket crashes the Milano into the ship, which begins to collapse. Groot protects the group by forming a shield of branches, sacrificing himself to save them. "We are Groot," he says before the impact. The ship crashes. Everyone survives, except Groot. Rocket, heartbroken, holds the twigs that remain of his friend, but the horror isn't over. Ronan emerges unscathed. He declares his victory, mocks the group by calling them the Guardians of the Galaxy, and raises his hammer to destroy Xandar. Then, Peter Quill starts singing and dancing. Ronan, confused, asks what he's doing. Peter replies, "I'm distracting you, you dirtbag." This gives Rocket and Drax time to shoot Ronan's hammer and release the Infinity Stone. Peter catches it, but the power nearly consumes him. Gamora yells for him to take her hand. He remembers his mother reaching out to him on her deathbed, and this time, he does. Gamora, Drax, and Rocket help him hold the stone, sharing the burden, and together they manage to contain its power. Ronan, disbelieving, asks how it's possible. Peter replies, "You said it yourself. We're the Guardians of the Galaxy." Ronan is destroyed, and the orb is sealed once again. Yondu arrives with his crew to claim the orb. Peter ultimately gives it to him, but warns him not to open it. Yondu departs, laughing. Later, on his ship, he discovers that Peter tricked him. Instead of the orb, he's carrying a troll doll. Rocket, devastated by Groot's death, is comforted by Drax. In Xandar, Nova Prime thanks the Guardians. She reveals to Peter that they discovered he is half human. His mother was from Earth, but his father was something very ancient, which explains how he was able to hold the stone for so long. Gamora tells Drax that his family can now rest in peace, though he knows his real war is against Thanos. Denarian Day gives them a restored Milano and clears their criminal records on the condition that they stop breaking the law. Back on the ship, Peter finally opens his mother's gift, a letter in which she calls him her little Star-Lord, and a new cassette with songs. Ain't No Mountain High Enough begins to play as the ship prepares for takeoff. Gamora sits beside Peter. Rocket looks at a small pot with a twig from Groot, which begins to move. This first film goes far beyond simply saving a galaxy. Everyone in this story lost something, or someone. Each of them carried a pain that, in one way or another, had hardened them and distanced them from the world and from others. And that is something many of us can relate to some degree. Because opening up and connecting with others is scary, especially when you've already lost something or someone, or when you've already been rejected. It's hard to trust again, to feel again, or to care about someone again. But I believe that's precisely what this film is about allowing ourselves a second chance, about giving a chance to what life still has to offer us, even when we think there's nothing left, about finding someone again, whether a friend, a partner, or a family member, even when we thought there was no room for anyone else, about finding the courage to take someone's hand, to love again, even if the last time we tried, our heart was broken, or even knowing that one day we might lose them, about allowing ourselves to take that step, to stop being just a loser, someone who has survived an unfair world and learned to look out only for themselves and become a guardian of the galaxy. And what does that mean? To me, it means that even if you lost, even if life has knocked you down, you can still choose to be a hero. Someone who, despite the pain, doesn't miss the chance to do something that truly matters, to care for others, and to reach out a hand. And that, at least for me, is what it really means to be a guardian of the galaxy. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And you and I'll see you in the next one.